We got to the point in life to where you can't speak to stupid. You know what I'm saying? And stupid is probably not a nice word to use, but I'm in my 40s. I'm almost 50 years old, and I can say whatever I want to say. Well, to a degree. But sometimes people are lava rocks, you know, those little red light rocks. They're lightweight. They're lava rocks, and you just can't really speak to it because it's not going to understand. And that's how people are sometimes.
Here's what I found, though, is that with this approach, I'm not trying to speak to them to break through to them. They're doing all the speaking. So the breakthrough is actually occurring on their own.
Yeah,
and that, I think, is extremely powerful.
Sometimes I just find I'm just kind of like, it's not that I've given up on humanity. I'm just waiting, for them to have their breakthrough and be like, oh yeah, maybe I should not be rude to other people. So I'm waiting for them to have a break. Yeah, breakthrough is probably a better word than stupid. I should not say that. But
yeah, there's usually lots of good breakthroughs when I interview people in this manner. So maybe you can look into it. And
for sure.
I'm really glad that you stopped to ask me what I was doing.
Yeah, because I was like, I see him all the time.
Oh, hey, what's up? There's one of my conversation partners. Do you have time to chat?
Second.
Okay.
1001.
Can I catch you later?
Well, I gotta get him something to eat because
Thanks so much.
Hey, thank you for meeting. Thanks for chatting.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check it out.
Good. I'm glad. Thank you.
For shizzle, Anthony.
For shizzle. All right.
I'll see you.
How are you, Vanessa? It's going. Do you have time to do another follow-up?
I have a few minutes.
Are you okay if I record it again?
Sure.
Okay. Can I ask you to stand over there again in the shade?
Sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, you good.
Okay. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind just standing over there again. And how much time do you have before you run off?
Okay, let me see. It is 11:21.
Okay.
So I have until 11:35, which means I have to walk away from here.
What if I set it for 9 minutes?
Yeah, that sucks.
Okay. I appreciate you stopping again. We've had, I think this might be our third conversation on camera, if I'm not mistaken. The very first time you wanted to talk about equity, I asked what that meant. You said it's epistemic justice. We started talking about narrative should be accepted as truth. I think that you had said, and we used the example of the Cochina ancestors.
Yeah.
That there's these group of marginalized people. White people have put these Cochina, and they call them dolls. They don't accept the truth of the claim from this indigenous group that these are ancestors.
Yes, with the lifespan.
Yep. So we kind of talked about that a little bit, and then I think we even talked about, we did this thought experiment where we started talking about the word true and the word truth, and you had a fantastic quote. You said something like, "I've always had trouble with that word." So do you want to pick it up with a broader discussion about what the word truth is, or do you want to get into a specific claim? We can pretty much go any way you want to go.
Yeah, so I had said that, in K through 12, I was taught the history of the founding fathers and so on and so forth as truth, as fact and as truth. But as now that more voices, scholars of color have a platform and have created works and reinterpretations or their perspectives of history, now language has shifted to perspectives. So it went from us being taught the story of the founding fathers as truth to now having counter narratives that are being passed off as different perspectives. But I came across this retweet, this meme, and I thought of our conversations.
Okay, so I'll read it. It's from David Hogg. When did he tweet it?
I don't know. I just came across it on Facebook and downloaded it.
He says, "The descendants of colonizers calling people illegal on stolen land is evidence of an education system that teaches lies, not history.
So I saw that, I thought of our conversation because he uses the word lies in there, which would denote a truth to being taught lies.
What makes something a lie?
That it's rooted in a myth, mythological origin story.
The Cochina ancestors, is that a lie?
I don't know if, well, within their epistemological framing, no. It's not. But I think what David Hogg is speaking to is that America's origin story is not. It's true, but only from their perspective.
Is truth dependent on a person's perspective? Or can truth stand on its own regardless of a person's perspective?
See, and that I don't know. That I would have to think further into.
That's a good answer.
Yeah, I would have to really spend time. I would have to really spend time thinking about that.
You remember we did the candies the last time?
Yeah.
And we were talking about whether the total number of pieces within is even or odd. Would you agree that the total number of pieces in here is either even or odd, regardless of the perspective or the narrative that we happen to be telling about it?
No, I'm saying that I can't make that. I can't.
We're doing a recording here, just so you know. You're fine being in it. I just want you to be aware that we're recording this and it might go on YouTube. Okay.
I said that I couldn't come to that conclusion because it would really depend on how you're conceptualizing the whole. And remember, I pointed out, So if you're counting pieces, you would come up with one answer. But if you're accepting this as a whole, with the pieces inside as one, then it really depends on how you conceptualize.
This reminds me of where I think we left it off, where if we had two indigenous marginalized cultures and they each had different narratives of whether the total number of pieces within a box of candies is either even or odd. You've got indigenous culture and marginalized culture A that says if you ever encounter a person who holds a box of candies, the total number of pieces will be even. And then we have another narrative that says no, the total number of pieces will be odd. How do we settle the difference? How do we actually determine the truth of the matter? Yes, it's true that they have narratives that it's even, or they have a narrative that it's odd. Would you agree that one of them is correct and one of them is mistaken?
No, they're both correct.
They're both correct. Okay, so this is the thing that I think we really need to focus on and solve before we move on and talk about police brutality or anything along those lines. How does a narrative make something factually true?
Well, I guess in terms of history, when you're promoting the narrative of we are an immigrant nation, we were built...
Would you mind coming just a little bit closer? And
we were built upon an immigrant nation is not true. Settler colonizers came over with a very specific intention of settling land and exploiting people of color through their casta system, their categorization of racial identities, where white is at the top of the hierarchy.
So, but there might be a white narrative of what happened. There might be an indigenous culture narrative of what happened. Would you agree that, independent of the narratives, there's actually a factual truth of the matter of what really did happen?
I think it would be for white people to
sorry. Hey guys, we're doing an interview here, just so you know, okay?
Oh, sorry.
But I do want to point out in this instance that we really have to remember our positionality. Like,
Positionality.
yes.
What is positionality?
Okay, so what I want to point out is you don't mean to be rude. You don't mean to exert your white male privilege, but in an instance like that, you just snapped your fingers at 3 people of color.
I would have done it regardless of their thing.
Exactly, and that will always be your defense. But you are not putting yourself in the perspective of people of color. To have a white man snap at them like that is very disrespectful.
Where's the positionality part of that?
So the positionality in that is you recognizing your tall, white, male privilege, light eyes, and where that socially positions you. And really being aware of that, because that's where our break in a lot of our disagreements happen. You see nothing wrong with that. In a person of color's world, there's everything wrong with that. Because your whole experience has told you that there is nothing wrong with snapping at people like that.
Okay. That was 11 minutes.
Oh. And we still have so much to cover.
We have a lot to cover.
Yeah.
And I think we maybe deviated just a little bit from this idea of narratives being true because of that little incident that just happened there.
But that's actually the perfect example, because the narrative that we are taught in K through 12, the dominant narrative, is that we are an immigrant nation, and you know that we the people means we the people, when placing yourself in that moment in time, it doesn't, and it never has included people of color when you have the one drop rule with black people. You know,
what's that?
So in that moment, when the Declaration of Independence is being, when the Bill of Rights is being written, they are not thinking of.
Would you mind coming just a little closer? I'm sorry, because of all that banging.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you won't get there.
They're not thinking of people of color. They're not thinking of blacks during that time. In that moment when it was written, they're not even thinking of poor white people. They're specifically talking about wealthy white men who had money, who were property owners when those documents were written. But that's like everyone's favorite thing to cite, as if they were thinking, yes, this Native American group is of equal power as us white males. Like, no, we all know that socially we know that was never true, you know, and that hasn't even, and right now the dominant narrative is a black and white narrative, because the work that I do, Mexican American Studies, go up north, no one knows what a Mexican American is, or they're like, so like how, like what percentage are you Mexican? You know, they can't wrap their head around the idea of Mexican American, and we get left out of the specifically Mexican Americans get left out of the narrative because we get grouped in with Mexicans. Yeah.
Fundamentally, though, it seems like it's your position that narrative should be accepted as truth.
I'm saying narrative should be accepted as complex and not sold off as one dominant narrative's truth.
Okay. I know you have to go, but I was thinking about the Kuchina ancestors, and this was the very first example that I think had come up, and I think you would say something like, we're putting these Kuchina ancestors in museums, and we're calling them dolls. When the Kuchina culture, I guess, thinks that they're their ancestors. So my question is, do you think, there's two claims here. The Kuchina culture thinks that they're their ancestors, and the Kuchina culture is factually correct that those are their ancestors. Do you think the Kuchina culture is factually correct that those are their ancestors?
Yes.
What makes them correct?
Because it's, if I leave my body, myself, and I position myself as someone within the Kachina culture, yes, it is correct. It's not for me as an outsider to say, it's not for me to meddle in. If that's what they believe, that's what they believe.
It's factually true that they believe that those are their ancestors. Is it factually true that those really are their ancestors?
Yes.
It's factually true that the Kachina ancestor, which we call dolls and then now in museums, are literally ancestors because they have that narrative that those are their ancestors.
Because as...
Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And my justification for that would probably be because they are the natives of the land, who work the land, who know the land, who built their systems.
Their narrative has a priority
Yes.
than any other narrative because they were here longer?
Because they are from and of this land. So as outsiders, we are the tourists in their area.
So we should accept it as factually true that those are not dolls. Those are ancestors.
Right.
Because they said so.
Yes. And we are on native land. So we can't ever forget that. We are on native land.
I totally understand what you're saying. And this might be redundant, but I am wondering, do you indeed think it's factually true that those are really Kachina ancestors?
Yes, if they are to the people and they're that meaningful, yes.
Okay.
It is. Because
The oldest narrative wins?
to see...
Is that sort of what we're talking about here?
But there's 2 pages on 1 page.
I give.
Don't let me put words in your mouth if that's not what you're saying.
Yes and no. I think that my overall position on most things is I just accept things as complex and nuanced. Because the oldest narrative wins, yes, but when you start talking in terms of traditions are problematic for what culture and society has evolved into. Because like the tradition is to celebrate fiesta. What is the fiesta celebration rooted in? It's actually a colonial celebration. But because we Latinos don't have access to that history of why we celebrate, which again, epistemic justice, they blindingly and willingly participate in this fiesta that is actually rooted in the genocide of their own ancestors. So that's how it all connects. So things are nuanced.
I'm wondering, let's say that somebody discovered a culture prior to the Kachina culture that was older. And it was their narrative that these were in fact dolls, that these are not ancestors of the Kachina culture. Would the ancestors suddenly become dolls if we can discover a culture before that was actually older or maybe here prior?
I don't know, because then that would mean if it was an older culture, I think that the representation of the ancestors would have some kind of evolution as well. If it was something, it would have to be someone or some culture completely not from the region to not recognize something that probably has already had its historical roots somewhere.
It sounds like what you're saying is we have the ability to change the truth of reality if we find narratives that we find compelling for subjective reasons.
Yes, absolutely. Every day. You can wake up and be depressed, or you can wake up and completely reframe your train of thought and decide to see the positive and take it from there.
Yeah.
But I have to go because I have to head to
You do. You've been very patient with your time and very generous with your time. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you stopping
I'll
again.
catch you out here again and we'll
do you want your
chat more.
piece? You want a third
Yes.
piece? Which color?
I think it was the yellow one that I needed.
Okay, very
but I
nice.
actually lost one of them.
You
so
lost
I'll
one?
Have to come back.
You want to take it?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Okay.
See ya.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye. This is a very difficult interlocutor. I feel like I'm walking on a razor's edge with this particular person. There was two instances where one of her friends walked into the shot, and I said, by the way, we're recording. But then there was another incident where there was these three people. They were off camera. They were probably minorities, but I heard them chattering out of my left ear. I didn't even see them. I may have looked over to just like give them the eye, like just get out of here. But they were talking kind of loud, and you know how sensitive I am about noise. So I kind of like snapped my fingers to get their attention. And I said, hey, we're doing a recording here. Well, that upset my interlocutor. She used that instance as a way to talk about my white privilege. Now, did I let that upset me or become defensive? No. I listened to her, I refocused the conversation, and we got back to the point at hand, which is, can narratives supersede the truth of the matter? There were a few times where there were some I don't knows in there. There were a few times in the past conversation, I think, where there were some I don't knows in there with her. And that's good. I don't knows are the doorway to belief revision. So that was good. That was good. She's in pretty deep. She has this tendency to go back to being very descriptive in the stories that she's telling and these examples. And I always sense that I'm going to have to kind of redirect it back to what we were talking about. She's getting into the weeds. I don't want to follow her into the weeds. I want to be up here looking down at the weeds, looking down at the grass, and figuring out how she's navigating to her destination. So all in all, it was a good talk. It was a little bit tenuous there at times because she could have completely shut down the way that I acted with those three people, at least her perception of it. I thought I asked some really good questions there, particularly this, keep bringing it back to narratives. Can narratives make something true? And in her view, they can. So I wanted to test her limits a little bit. If we found a culture that preceded the Cucina culture, who said, no, those really are dolls, what do we do with that? I don't know. And these are the seeds of doubt. These are the seeds of questioning that I'm out here to plant. So she can think about it and then maybe come back and we can talk some more about it. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. That's perfect. Do you suddenly start looking to see which narrative is oldest? Or how do you go about figuring things out? Oh my gosh, that's just a great question. That's just a great question. The distinction that I was really trying to get through to her was the Cucina culture deems these objects to be their ancestors. Do you think it's factually true that that's what they thought? Or do you think it's factually true that those really are their ancestors? And she went full relativism. She went full, I don't know what word to use here, but she's all in. Narrative wins the day. Narrative wins the day. A narrative can make something true. And narratives can change. So truth is changing depending on who has the oldest and most aggrieved voice. And I honestly, I don't see how humans can navigate the world with that outlook. So we're going to have to keep coming back to that. We're going to have to keep coming back to this. So this is a good time, if you're not comfortable unmuting yourself and talking, leave some suggestions for me. If she's comfortable coming up to me. She's comfortable being recorded. She's comfortable saying, I don't know. So if you have some ideas on ways that I might be able to help break through with Vanessa, please leave them in the SE Live chat text channel, and I'll read them later today. Good morning. How are you? I think I'm all right. Do you have time for a short interview?
What is it about?
Good question. I'm practicing street epistemology. Street epistemology is where you